Good morning. Hi, everyone out there on YouTube. Hi to folks on LinkedIn and the Facebook audience. My name is Vanessa Maturko. I'm the research manager at the Innocence Project, and I am happy to welcome you to our second annual Just Data Conference. We are proud to host this event today because we know that data can advance justice here in New York and across the Innocence Network, the group of over 70 independent organizations fighting wrongful convictions and transforming the criminal legal system across the US and around the world. The social sciences, psychology, sociology, anthropology are an essential part of this work. Social science supports our legal and policy advocacy in courthouses and state houses. It informs our social work and our public education around wrongful convictions. The research that you all are doing out there, often quietly and behind the scenes, is really powerful. The things that you've taught us about the psychology of witness memory and behavior during interrogation has helped free hundreds of innocent people. So we're going to spend today showcasing that research. Hopefully we'll make some connections across disciplines, walks of life, across the globe. We want to start conversations and collaborations and ultimately encourage more practically useful research. So put all your questions and comments in the chat, introduce yourselves, let us know where you're tuning in from, what brought you here. We have a packed agenda today with insights not only from social scientists, but from advocates and people who have been wrongfully convicted and exonerated themselves. So I will give you a brief overview of what to expect today. We'll begin with a worldwide look at wrongful convictions and place-based advocacy work. We'll hear from scholars whose research highlights the role that race and ethnicity play at different points in the criminal legal system. We'll build on that with a conversation about emerging technologies, artificial intelligence, surveillance, and how these new frontiers intersect with race and racism and the implications for our work. After a break, we're honored to feature our keynote speaker, Stanford University professor and Innocence Project board member, Dr. Jennifer Eberhardt. Following that, we'll hear from two uniquely multidisciplinary research teams about how we can collaborate and use data to inform and improve our work. And we'll wrap up with a consideration of plea bargaining, the whole process, and guilty pleas. I should note that the research presented here today will be published in a forthcoming issue of the Wrongful Conviction Law Review, so stay tuned for that. And before we get into the program, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the people who helped plan this event. The rest of the Data Science and Research Department here, Dr. Jamie Henderson and Giselle Rentas. They, along with our senior leadership team, our special advisor on race and wrongful conviction, our communications and production teams, our Innocence Network partners, have all made today possible. And now I'm pleased to introduce the Innocence Project's Executive Director, Christina Swarns, whose recognition of and support for research is deeply appreciated. Take it away, Christina.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. Good morning, and welcome to Just Data, Advancing the Innocence Movement, our second virtual conference exploring the critical role that science and data play in driving the effort to end wrongful convictions. As Vanessa said, I'm Christina Swarns, and it is my honor and privilege to serve as Executive Director of the Innocence Project in New York. Since our organization was founded years ago, we've freed or exonerated more than 245 people. We've helped to pass more than 200 laws that prevent wrongful conviction, and we've helped to build a movement for change that now spans the globe. From the beginning, science and data have been at the root of the Innocence Project's work. In 1992, our co-founders, Barry Scheck and Peter Neufeld, pioneered the use of DNA evidence to irrefutably prove innocence. And in the years since, we have tracked and analyzed our clients' cases in order to build a powerful body of evidence, data, and research to quantify the depth of the problem of wrongful conviction and address some of the root causes of the errors in our errors plaguing our criminal legal system. For example, data shows that 27% of wrongful convictions involve false confessions. Science teaches us that the human brain does not finish developing until the early 20s, and children are particularly vulnerable to false confessions. Relying on this and science, we've advanced significant law changes governing the manner in which police question children. Specifically, Illinois, Oregon, Utah, Colorado, Indiana, California, Connecticut, and Delaware now ban the practice of police using deception in the interrogation of minors. And we're urging other states to follow suit. Here in New York, where deception is still permitted, the case of Hugh Burton stands as a powerful example of the importance of data, law change, and criminal legal system reform. Hugh was arrested and interrogated for hours immediately after finding his mother murdered when he came home from school. Just 16 at the time, he was tired, stressed, and without adult support or guidance during the police questioning. He confessed to the crime. 30 years later, in Hugh's post-conviction appeal, Dr. Saul Kassin, a prolific scholar on false confessions, served as our expert and drew on decades of experience to explain how people under pressure, especially children, can and do confess to crimes they did not commit. Dr. Kassin opened the eyes of the judge and the prosecutors to the data and science around interrogations and false confessions. This information formed the basis of the judge's decision to vacate Hugh's 3-decade-old conviction. Since his exoneration, Hugh has served as an avid campaigner for changes to the laws governing police questioning of children, including helping to ban the use of deception in such interrogations. In our conversations today, we're going to look broadly at wrongful convictions in the U.S. and abroad, and we're going to focus on 3 specific challenges and opportunities for social scientists: race and wrongful convictions, artificial intelligence, and plea bargains. First, we know that racial bias is rampant in our criminal legal system, and the data shows that Black and brown people are particularly at risk for wrongful conviction. Here are some staggering statistics from the National Registry of Exonerations. Innocent Black people are 7 times more likely to be wrongly convicted of murder than innocent white people. The cases of Black people exonerated from murder convictions are 50% more likely to have involved police misconduct than those of their white counterparts. There is so much more research needed to fill out these data points and to understand how we truly counter these biases and make our systems better. Second, artificial intelligence and its role in emerging forensic technologies like facial recognition systems, ShotSpotter, and others is the new frontier for us. These technologies are too often rolled out by police departments, despite the fact that they're untested, unvalidated, unregulated, and rely on algorithms that may be skewed by inbuilt biases. This combination of factors has already led to wrongful arrests and may soon lead to wrongful convictions. Consider the collective strength of the advocacy, arguments, and guardrails we can implement if they are backed by rigorous, accurate research generated by experts in all of these fields. Third, plea bargains. We know that innocent people plead guilty to crimes they did not commit. The trial penalty, the promise of a low sentence in exchange for a plea bargain, coupled with the threat of a severe sentence if unsuccessful at trial, is one of the unfair structural pressures that propel such unjust outcomes. We need to continue building the data and science-based case for reform around plea bargain practices. And that's why we brought you all together. In order to challenge and correct the errors in our criminal legal system, we need to make an irrefutable case for justice based on scientific evidence and data. Today's event builds on foundations laid by previous collaborations, like the Innocence Network Scholarship Committee. It brings together scientists, researchers, social scientists, innocence practitioners, and, most importantly, wrongfully convicted and exonerated people for conversations that center on some of the most crucial issues in our wrongful conviction work. We hope that today's conversations will enlighten, provoke, and inspire, that they will spark new ideas and innovation, foster partnerships across geographies and disciplines, and generate cutting-edge research. It is our genuine hope that we will look back and say that a piece of truly groundbreaking work was germinated in a conversation we had today. In a moment, we're going to get back get this show on the road, but I also want to join Vanessa in thanking my extraordinary colleagues at the Innocence Project, and especially the mighty data science and research team, including the department's director, Dr. Jamie Henderson, and research manager Vanessa Maturco, whose vision of a data-informed innocence movement is at the heart of today's event. And with that, I am going to hand it back to you for your host, who is Vanessa, who's our host for the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. And thank you everyone for tuning in out there. I see that we have viewers from Baltimore, from Birmingham, Alabama. Hi to Erin in Far Rockaway. Hi to Legal Eagle Gigi. Stay tuned for the AI discussion. And now I'm going to hand it off to the moderator of our first section of the day, Valina Beatty. Valina is a law professor at Indiana University in Bloomington and a board member of the New Innocence Project of Indiana. She previously served as the founding director of the West Virginia Innocence Project. She's successfully exonerated wrongfully convicted clients, obtained presidential grants of clemency for drug offenses, and served as an elected board member of the National Innocence Network. She's the co-editor, of the Wrongful Convictions Reader and the author of the award-winning book, Manifesting Justice, Wrongfully Convicted Women Reclaim Their Rights. On to you, Valina.
And this is an exciting day. We're so glad you all are here, and especially joining us for this very first panel, where we're looking at how does it matter to have research that is place-based, that is specific to different locations. So our first panel is Innocence Worldwide, uncovering and exploring wrongful convictions in Spain and across Texas. So first, we're going to start off by going abroad and talking about wrongful convictions in Spain. This is a presentation by Dr. Nuria Sanchez, a PhD in psychology, who is joining us from the University of Salamanca, Spain. Thank you, Dr. Sanchez.
Thank you so much. I don't know if people can see me. Yes. Well, it's really nice to be here and present the results of research we have conducted on wrongful convictions in Spain with Guadalupe Blanco Velasco, Linda Reven, Jaume Masip, and Antonio Manzanero. Even though wrongful convictions have been researched internationally for more than 100 years, wrongful convictions have hardly been researched in Spain. We only have data from the General Council of the Judiciary, which has recorded 33 cases of judicial errors since 2010. Internationally, wrongful convictions have mainly originated from 4 causes. According to the Innocence Project, the main cause is eyewitness misidentifications, followed by invalidated or improper forensic science, false confessions, and finally, having an inadequate legal defense. The main objective of our project is to analyze Spanish judicial sentences that have admitted wrongful convictions. So the study sample is made up of the sentences of the Spanish Supreme Court published between 1996 and 2022 that consider or admit a review appeal. The review appeal is the only appeal that innocent people can file to reopen a closed case. Firstly, we drafted a coding scheme with the relevant variables to code each review sentence. And we can divide the variables in 3 groups: characteristics of wrongfully convicted individuals and cases, and factors that contribute to wrongful convictions. To trained persons, to trained people or coders coded independently 65% of the sentences based on the coding scheme. And the remaining 35% of the sentences were coded by a single trained coder. After coding, the coders meet to discuss the discrepancies and to reach the corresponding agreements. All the categories I'm going to talk about today had a percentage of agreement higher than 80%. Moreover, the results that I am presented here are about individuals who were wrongly convicted to prison, not to any type of penalties, only to prison. Therefore, the data is about 89 cases. Well, what results did we find? The majority of wrongfully convicted people are men, and the sentences did not state the nationality of 60% of the exonerees. In the cases in which we did have the nationality, approximately half were Spanish and half were foreigners. The length of liberty deprivation sentence that people received varied greatly from 3 days to 30 years. And in this table, you can see that robberies and similar crimes have the highest percentage, 40%. Crimes against collective security, such as traffic crimes or drug trafficking, are the second most frequent type of crime, and injuries are the third. Regarding the causes that contribute to wrongful convictions, the most common cause in Spain is misconduct of legal professionals, because this cause explains, at least in part, 64% of wrongful convictions. In conclusion, the take-home message is that the conduct of judicial system professionals is very important to reduce wrongful convictions in Spain. For example, we can reduce wrongful convictions if police inform properly the detainee about their rights, if the lawyer is concerned about whether the defendant understands the crime of which he or she is accused, or if the police and the judge verify the identity of the suspect. For all these reasons, we are going to write a guide of good practices to disseminate our research findings among legal professionals, offering recommendations to reduce wrongful convictions. So if you have any questions, you can contact me by sending an email. And that's all. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sanchez. And we have similar issues here in the United States about people knowing their rights and being informed of their rights by police. And the US is sadly the leader worldwide in wrongful convictions. So now we're going to turn to Dr. Matthew Johnson of John Jay College of Criminal Justice. He will be presenting on his research, wrongful convictions in Texas, sexual assault prosecutions, false guilty pleas, stranger rape by misidentification, youthful complaint recantations, and drug prosecutions. Thank you, Dr. Johnson.
Thank you. I'm looking for my slides. I'm not seeing it. Yeah, I don't see my slide. I'm looking for the clicker thing or something.
Well, while you're looking for that, I'm so glad you're talking about Texas, because Texas has been a space of a lot of change due to research. They've passed a lot of statutes to protect the rights of people charged because of research in this area. I don't know if
I don't need my slides. Let me go ahead, because I know there's only a little bit of time. So I want to thank the Innocence Project for this opportunity. I'm Matthew Barry Johnson. I'm from John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York. My co-presenter or my co-author here is Janquil Acevedo, who's doing his doctoral studies in Australia at this moment that we speak. But our examination of wrongful conviction in Texas really began with earlier work I had done. And I published a book in 2021 titled Wrongful Conviction in Sexual Assault. And just to give a condensed statistic from that work, we identified, and this was as of 2017, that 72% of the entire list of Innocence Project exonerees were all resulting from one particular type of crime, and that was stranger rapes. Stranger rape is not a very frequent crime, and so it's highly and dramatically overrepresented. And so we wanted to look at that further. And we looked at Texas because Texas is the state that has had the most wrongful convictions in sexual assaults. And so what do we find? Commonly, when you do research, you find things you didn't intend to find. So the first thing we found that was outstanding was that sexual assaults do not predominate as a crime type among Texas exonerations, that in fact, drug offenses were the largest crime type associated with exonerations in Texas. And in fact, I believe it's 46% of the entire list of 396 exonerations in the state of Texas as of March 2022 were drug offenses. So that is relevant. But let me move on. We did find interesting findings about sexual assault among the Texas exonerations. Sexual assaults comprise 26% of the 396. So that's still a relatively large proportion. And interestingly, about the sexual assaults, prior researchers had suggested that the predominance of sexual assault among confirmed wrongful convictions was an artifact of the fact that sexual crimes have a high likelihood of having biologically testable samples that can lead to exoneration. However, what we found in Texas was that half of the wrongful convictions in sexual assaults from Texas were independent of DNA. So DNA was not used in the post-conviction phase to establish the wrongful conviction. So this suggests further that the wrongful convictions in sexual assault are probably not driven solely by the fact that they are DNA testable samples, that there are features of the investigation of the crime that we need to look to understand differences or differential distribution of wrongful conviction. We find that, we find the data suggests strongly that wrongful conviction is not random error through our criminal investigative system, that in fact, it's located or more likely to be located, or there are risk factors. And this is something we all, I think, are aware of, but we think it warrants more attention. The other thing I want to mention, and I'm looking for my clock here, is that both as it applies to the drug offenses and the sexual assault wrongful convictions from Texas, in both crime types, there's a large proportion of false guilty pleas. In fact, 97% of the drug offenses will involve false guilty pleas, and about 26 or 27% of the sexual assaults were the product of false guilty pleas. So as suggested, I think earlier by Christina, that this really focuses the importance of examining this whole problem of overcharging and in the context of plea negotiations and how innocent defendants are vulnerable. Our data we found regarding race were not remarkable. When I say not remarkable, we're not different than it's been found in other places. And I also want to add that the National Registry of Exonerations, the database that we used, does not routinely report the race ethnicity of the victim, which limits us in terms of our conclusions we can draw. So thank you very much, and I'm eager to hopefully entertain questions later on.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. And also thank you to viewers who have recently joined us from Florida, Colorado, and Utah, and really asking important questions about, is there research being done, not just in Texas, but in those states or in Kentucky about fear of trial penalties? We're going to move now to be joined by Christopher Scott. He's a leader in challenging wrongful convictions. He himself was wrongly convicted in Dallas, Texas. And we're going to show a short trailer for the documentary True Conviction, which is about his work as an exoneree to free other wrongfully convicted people.
Christopher Scott was convicted of capital murder.
In accordance with the Court of Criminal Appeals opinion, this court finds you actually innocent of these offenses. Today, you are a free man.
Scott says priority number one is helping others who've been falsely accused.
I started my own organization. We read their cases, we work their cases, and we try to get them out of prison.
I got myself a dream team. We each other's rock, we each other's foundation.
Police officers say it was one of the most cold-blooded triple murders they've seen in a long time.
My name is Max Sofor, and I was convicted of a triple homicide that I did not do.
And this don't add up. They know it's a lie.
So you're 100% sure that Max Sofor is guilty?
I don't have any doubts about that at all.
What color was it? Blue? I don't know.
We looking for this guy right here. His name is Don Wallace.
Don he probably pulled that robbery because Don, he did a lot of stuff.
You know, we ain't telling you to do no snitching or whatever. We just trying to get an innocent brother out of prison, that's it. Looking for Don Wallace is like looking for the dead bird in tall grass. You can't see him, but you can smell him.
Some of the investigators thought that there were 5 bullets. It was 4 bullets. There's no question.
No one cares about justice. They don't want the truth. And the truth is what's going to set me free.
Oh, I know. I can't never hear today. Man, please, man, get me out of prison, man.
I'm gonna try. My whole mission is to free as many people as I can before I leave this world.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here with you all today. I want to thank the Innocence Project for allowing me to be a part of this great and remarkable data research project that they're doing. And hopefully, you know, one day we all can come together and make this world a better place. One of the main things of my concern is it's about, as you say, eyewitness identification. Because anytime you have cross-racial identification, that's one of the worst ones you can have, because at the time that I was wrongfully convicted, the general description of the 2 individuals that committed this crime was 2 African-American men, one tall, one short, dark complected with a low haircut. Now, you tell me how many people that walks every day on this earth that fits that description. Every African-American man you see kind of fit that description. So it was very vague. And then coming from a person that's of another race is another thing, because pretty much everybody say, oh, they all look alike. But no, we don't. We all have different features as well. And I think that's something that we must have to clear up before the criminal justice system gets any better. I think that, you know, the way we choose our jury panel selection is another thing, because a lot of times African-American, you know, brown or black people cannot afford to take out and be on the jury panel. It's just, you know, it's just unfair that when I went to prison, or when I was tried for this case, I was tried by an all-white jury panel. And we have to make the jury panel be more diversified. Because just imagine if I had an African-American person, maybe 1 or 2 on that jury panel, that, things may have been different, because at the end of the day, they know how it feels to be put in the spotlight of not being judged by the person that you are, but being judged by the color of your skin. It was amazing that we was able to elect the first African American district attorney in the state of Texas history. And one thing about it, when he came in, he said that he was going to make some changes. He was our DA for about 7 or 8 months. He had fired 9 prosecutors, and all these prosecutors was white. And one statement that he made was this: if he could charge them for the crime that they committed, because they committed a crime, because 9 times out of 10 they knew that we were innocent, but they just felt like they wanted to get a conviction from the court system. I think that we should raise the price on jury panels, because they have raised the price, but it was mere pennies. And if you actually just ask any African American or Hispanic person, does that pay for a day's pay that they miss from work? And they'll tell you no, because it just doesn't add up. Another thing I have an issue with is the death penalty case. We know we have a lot of innocent people that's on death row right now. Just other clip you just saw, Max Sofar, he was innocent on death row, and he had spent 40 years on there. And 2 weeks before he died, he died 2 weeks prior of us getting a interview with the Criminal Court of Appeal to either get him freed or exonerated or getting a new trial. So we know there's innocent people on death row, because we see it every day, all day. And once you execute a person, you can't get that person's life back. And it's sad that innocent people get executed for crimes that they did not commit. So we must do better with that. And that's about dealing with our jury selection more vague and better. Because at the end of the day, it's crazy how it happened, because of the fact that one African American woman stood up and said that she couldn't be on my jury panel because we had dated. And I had never seen this lady a day in my life. And I think she did that just because she couldn't afford to miss work, because the pay that being on the jury panel just don't pay as much as she did when she's going to work. So those are things that we have to clean up. And another thing, if you ever be called to be on a jury panel, don't run from it. You must embrace it, because at the end of the day, just imagine, your one vote alone can stop an innocent man or woman from going to prison, or worse yet, going to death row. Now, at the time that this crime happened, I was pretty much tried by, everybody that wasn't of color. The police is with white. Okay, sounds good.
And just to pick up on what you're saying, Chris, you've told me that the majority of exonerees in Dallas County, like you, had an all-white jury. Majority of those exonerees had an all-white jury. And thank you for bringing up, this real problem for people in general, but also people of color in serving, because they're not paid enough, right? There's not that compensation. I'm so glad you're encouraging people, don't run from this service. We really need you. You can stop wrongful convictions by serving on a jury. But that only gets us halfway there, because the second half is folks who are struck from juries based on their race. So let's connect this with some research going on. So Arizona's become the first state that has created a rule just last year that says, you know what, prosecutors, defense attorneys, you can't strike someone for no reason whatsoever. You can't. Most states, every other state, you can, right? You know that very well, that you can be struck and the reason is, oh, I don't like your face or whatever. So there is research going on right now to see if that's going to make a difference. that because prosecutors have to give a reason for why they're striking someone, if we'll see more people of color on juries. And so far, we are seeing that in Arizona. It's only been 1 year, but we have research showing us that there are more people of color serving on those juries because they're not struck. And another place of research, you're in Texas, and I know you care very much about what information is disclosed by prosecutors before trial, right? So we've got the Michael Morton Act in Texas that was named after an exoneree based on a lot of research that this information should be disclosed by prosecutors. But what do you think about that? Where can we go next in terms of prosecutors turning over important information?
Well, discovery is one of the main focuses that we need people to pay a lot of attention to, because how can you have a fair trial if you don't have everything that the cops have or the prosecution side have? So that's something that we must, we got to make that law more broader and better for the individuals, because 9 times out of 10, the defense side is not as prepared as the prosecution side, because they get the discovery case first and they can keep it pretty much for however long they want to keep it. And when you turn it over to the defense side, now they have about a month or 2 to go through the discovery, but the prosecution had enough time to look at it for maybe a year or less than a year. But now you have 2 months to kind of like clog everything together and try to put a formidable case together. And that's why a whole lot of wrongful convictions happen. Because if you're not prepared to go to trial and have everything that you need to have, then it's likely a wrongful conviction is going to happen. We need discovery to be a major focal point in our legislation, because we need that. And another thing is, a lot of times when discovery is presented quickly, it's only presented to one type of race. It's only presented to maybe, the white people that's going to trial. Maybe they get a fair trial, because we know one thing about it. Our criminal justice system is very unbalanced and it's racial. So 9 times out of 10, a white person would have a better defense than an African-American person. And that's just how it is. And I'm just being 100 with you. It always happens that way. And we have to stop that racism in the courtroom, because everybody deserves a fair trial.
Yeah, and you've shared that even when we have these laws in place, like the Michael Morton Act, right, they're not helping all defendants in the same way. So exactly what you're saying about race. But, a number of states haven't even gotten as far as the discovery of the Michael Morton Act. We have great research in Virginia, for example, but we have a number of studies in different states that really are trying to encourage this kind of change in their particular state as well. So that kind of brings me to, what about these differences between rural prosecutions and convictions versus urban prosecutions and convictions? So in cities like Dallas, we see these eyewitness misidentification problems like you had, like you said, cross-racial misidentifications, which was just egregious in your case. And we have research to, again, propose reforms in cities. But it seems like in rural areas, we're seeing more non-DNA cases, so faulty forensic cases. I don't know if you want to talk about that at all, like these non-DNA cases, right?
Yeah. My case was a non-DNA case, and those are the hardest cases to get exonerated on, because when you don't have any DNA, how can you prove that you didn't commit this crime? You know what I mean? In non-DNA cases, it's either 2 things that's going to get you out of this situation. It's either new discovered evidence, or the individual come back with a detailed statement saying that he or she actually committed this crime. And in my fact that, I was glad that somebody actually came back and confessed to this capital murder. If not, I would have remained in prison. because every Innocence Project at the time that I was in prison said they did not work on non-DNA cases because we can't prove that you didn't commit this crime. But at the same time, I had to pass a polygraph test to get out of prison. And 13 years prior, I asked for that same polygraph test, and they denied me to have a polygraph test because they said it was inadmissible in a court of law.
Yes, we absolutely can. But Chris, can you continue what you were saying?
We just got to do better with the non-DNA cases because a lot of times they get overlooked. And it's so many more people in prison that doesn't have DNA in their cases, and we need to look more thorough at non-DNA cases.
And we'll just wrap up here and we'll move back to talk with Dr. Johnson and Dr. Sanchez. But I do want to point out one thing that you shared about the importance of the prosecutor in Dallas and creating a conviction integrity unit and how important those units can be to freeing wrongly convicted people. And again, we've got ongoing research in those areas that are looking at the success of conviction integrity units in different states. So I know you personally experienced that and brought that up. So thank you for sharing that too.
For sure. Thank you.
So we'll turn back to Dr. Johnson and Dr. Sanchez for any questions that have been posed to them or anything else that they would like to share about their research. So if you're out there and you have questions for Dr. Johnson and Dr. Sanchez, please go ahead and put them in the chat. And also if you have any questions for Mr. Scott as well that we can share. And just to say, we now have international viewers who are joining us. We have viewers from Canada, and thankful for the folks who are in Connecticut and New York and Tennessee who are tuning. And until we see some of those questions pop up, one thing I was going to talk with Christopher about is going back to the no crime wrongful convictions, non-DNA wrongful convictions. We also see in my own research that LGBTQ plus folks are more likely to be wrongly convicted where there was no crime. And as Chris was saying, it's so hard to have your conviction reversed if you don't have DNA, if it's a non-DNA case. And if there's no crime, there's inherently no DNA. So thanks again, Chris, for bringing it.
Can I jump in for a minute?
Absolutely, go for it.
I want to follow up on what Chris was saying at the end about this distinction between the DNA exonerations and the non-DNA exonerations. Gratefully, we have this resource, which, I talked about in my presentation, the data that's accumulated from the National Registry, which includes both DNA and non-DNA exonerations. And we can look closely in our examination of cases from Texas. A number of cases, as I said, a number of the sexual assault cases were actually exonerated, not based upon DNA, but based upon post-conviction, vigorous post-conviction investigation that examined and challenged aspects of the state's case. And one of the points that I've been making when I do talks is that the value of DNA certainly has been that it's been able to free innocent people, and it also has been able to definitively identify offenders. But really the broader value of the DNA revolution and all that the Innocence Project has done is that it has clarified for us that the types of evidence that the legal system has depended upon for decades is often unreliable. Before DNA, people, eyewitness identification, who can go against that? A lot of people were wrongfully convicted with multiple eyewitness misidentifications. The false confessions, the jailhouse informant testimony, all of these things, which were the framework for U.S. prosecution, have been, eroded largely because of the DNA exonerations. because they're like a map for us to show us how to proceed in the cases where there isn't DNA by attacking different aspects of the prosecution case. So I just wanted to, make that point. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dr. Johnson. And just for viewers out there who are wondering, if you want to know more about Mr. Scott's work and what he's been doing, he, as you've seen, he has a podcast, he has a series, but the documentary True Conviction can be watched on Amazon Prime. And we do have a question for you, Mr. Scott. So having experienced a wrongful conviction, is it a struggle for you to give your time to this cause? And building off of what Dr. Johnson was saying, the number of people who they don't have the DNA, it's a lot harder to work on their cases. Is it a struggle for you to continue to work on those cases?
It's not a struggle at all because, I've been there and done it. So I know how I feel to lay up in a prison bed every night going to bed knowing that you're innocent. So my main focus was, if I ever got exonerated, to start an organization that actually works on wrongful conviction cases. And my main focus was non-DNA cases because I know how hard it is for an individual to be exonerated with non-DNA cases. So that's my main focal point, is non-DNA cases, because they're the hardest and there's more work behind it, but it just feeds my fire to try to get out there and find the evidence and the information that I need to help someone that was in my position. Because being wrongfully convicted, and it hits much different than being guilty of a crime you committed while you're in prison. So, I make a valuable effort to work on cases with non-DNA cases, and that's my passion and that's my mission. And I will continue to work on non-DNA cases for sure. Those are at the top of my list.
And can you share a bit some of the other work that you're doing? So your podcast, some other ways that you're challenging wrongful convictions?
Yeah, basically my podcast deal with the criminal justice system, and I deal with a lot of judges that comes on the podcast. I deal with prosecutors as well, because these are the people that, that's inside of our court buildings, that makes the law, that governs the law. So if we can educate these individuals on why wrongful convictions happen and things of that nature, maybe they'll have some kind of heart and compassion to look deeper into the case, not just agreeing with what the cops say, or if a prosecutor is going that and beyond to try to get a conviction. We need a lot of people in our court building with compassion, because without compassion, what do you have? If it wasn't for Craig Watkins, the first African-American DA to start the Conviction Integrity Unit, a lot of men, African-American men in prison, would still be in there. I was housed with over 55 wrongfully convicted men. And once I got out to see these men, when I walked into a room and I saw all of these guys that was telling me that was wrongfully convicted in prison, I couldn't believe it. But once we got out and we was able to be at a bond as a brotherhood of wrongful conviction, all of us came together and like, hey, we got to go and legislate. We got to go to our state capitol, and we got to put bills in place that can help individuals like us. And there's one thing that I love the most that we did. We brought up the double blind standard. And a double blind standard is the arresting officer that's over the case cannot be in a room when they're doing a photographic lineup or a regular lineup, because it's easy for an officer to point at a picture and say, well, this is the individual that actually committed this crime, and that's not right. So we got that taken care of, and there's much more things that we need to do.
Thank you. And I'm so glad you brought up that research, which is valuable nationally, but has really made a difference in creating change in Texas. So thank you for bringing that up.
Sure.
We do have a general question about what's the state's obligation if there is new DNA testing that later shows that witness lied and there's new DNA testing that can exonerate someone. What is the state's obligation in that? And I'm happy to answer that, but if anyone else wants to.
I mean, if the DNA proved that he didn't commit that crime, the best thing you can do is exonerate that person. Why would you want a person that DNA doesn't prove that he committed this crime to stay in prison? It just doesn't make any sense. And the crazy part about it, that's a crime in itself. If you try to keep a person in prison knowing that his DNA doesn't match, the crime, you're supposed to let him go. And if you try to keep him in prison, we got to put a law in place. Like if you do that and you knowing and willing and intentionally did that, you should be held accountable. Point blank, period.
Well, and prosecutors do have rules, ethics rules that they're supposed to follow.
Right.
So there's, for folks out there, there's a ABA rule 3.8 that now has a subsection G and H that says if a prosecutor learns about evidence that proves someone didn't commit a crime after the conviction, they have to come to the court with that. They have to at least tell the court about that. And then there's an additional obligation to try to rectify the wrongful conviction themselves. And some states have not adopted that yet, but we do have these ethics rules that prosecutors are supposed to follow that would apply there. And I guess we've got some folks out here wondering, what can advocacy groups do to support legislation that can help in non-DNA cases? I mean, Chris, you were talking about the IID studies and changing those laws on lineups. But what can advocacy groups do here in the United States in their unique states?
I mean, for one, you can write to your state representative letters and let them know about what you feel about this certain particular law or this particular bill. You can go down with us and testify in front of the House and Senate committee, because the more the merrier. Like you say, it takes a village. And if we all can go in there with strong points of view about what we feel like the criminal justice system can be corrected, that's going to eliminate wrongful conviction cases and things of that nature, we all supposed to come together and do that, because we do not supposed to have innocent people in prison for crime they didn't commit. So talk to your legislation, talk to your state representative, write letters, write support letters. Get with groups that that focuses on criminal justice reform in our legislation. Because like I said, we go down there as a whole and as a group, and we don't take no BS from the legislation about, getting these changes made. Things can happen because these are elected officials. They have to be voted in. So if they're not doing the right thing, then those other individuals should be voted out, because we got to put the right people in the right position to make the right changes.
Melina, can I
Dr.
add
Johnson,
something?
please, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I just want to add, in terms of advocacy groups, obviously, there's a tremendous amount of state variation, but it seems to me that one reform that's needed in virtually all states is it needs to be more public support. There needs to be better support for public defense. That I know certainly in the states that have urban populations, the public defense system is broken, it's underfunded, and the attorneys cannot carry on their work, and it's just intolerable. And because the criminal defendants are not really a constituency that is represented well on state level, it's just tolerated. But obviously, if we had a better, more effective public defense system, some of these cases would be caught, on the front end.
A lot of times, police departments don't want to admit that they made a mistake. That's one of the main keys that it was, because when I went to trial, when I took my polygraph test, my attorney said, Christopher, it's 24 officers in that room that wanting you to fail this polygraph test. And she said, you know why? And I was kind of dumbfounded about it. She said because they just don't want to admit they made a mistake. They don't want to admit they made a mistake. So now they have to admit that they made a mistake because I was one of the ones that was found guilty. Found, exonerated with non-DNA. And they didn't want to admit that they made that mistake. And it was hard for them to apologize for it. But if you made that mistake, you have to own it, own up to it. And next time around, try to do better.
Right. And as we're talking about prosecutorial responsibility, right,
Right.
and their ethics, both before and after a conviction, let's bring Dr. Sanchez back into this. We have a question asking about, is there a difference in prosecutorial responsibility and accountability in Spain?
In Spain, there are no responsibility for judges or legal defense if they committed a mistake. If this mistake is not with intention, I mean, there are figure that is when a judge commit a mistake, a real mistake, but this crime is not in cases in real. This is a case in the law, but no in real life, in our real life. So I think that is a thing that very important also that we must can into account. Yes.
And we have another question here. I mean, is there another country in Europe that could be seen as a gold standard in accountability for prosecutors, if you know?
In other countries in Europe, I'm not sure, so I think that I can answer this question. But yes, it's an important issue.
And it's a great question, and this is exactly why we need to have research that is international to see where are these reforms happening, where are prosecutors accountable and behaving differently, especially behaving differently than they are in the U.S. To jump back to what Dr. Johnson was saying, a lot of this legislation that needs to be passed or rules that need to be changed isn't just through Congress on the federal level, but is the state level.
Right.
And is going to your state legislators and advocating for your state public defender systems as well. So, Dr. Johnson, I don't know if there's anything else you'd be able to quickly share about state-based advocacy.
No, I don't. No, not really. I know that it's difficult. I've been involved in a variety of campaignings through the course of my career, and it just requires a lot of work, a lot of coalition building, a lot of different groups that have similar interests, and a lot of patience and persistence, and reaching out and messaging. Earlier in my career, I was part of a coalition that abolished the death penalty in New Jersey, which I'm very proud. And I wasn't so much a major contributor. Well, I was a major contributor, but I learned a tremendous amount from that effort. I think that's a whole nother topic maybe we can get into at some point, but it's part of our work. It's part of our work, just like the trial work and the research and so forth.
Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson, and thank you to all of our panelists and discussants today as we really tried to dive into how practical research can prove that wrongful convictions happen and can prevent them from happening in the future. So thank you to our panelists very much.